Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Olivia. I am one of the Adult Services librarians at the South Pasadena Public Library. I'm here with Chloe O. Davis. Before we get started, I just want to say thank you to the Friends of the South Pasadena Public Library for funding this event. You can join or support the Friends by clicking the link in the chat for more information. But most importantly, Chloe O. Davis is with us. Chloe O. Davis is a proud Black bisexual woman and debut author who currently works in the entertainment industry in New York. She is a graduate of Hampton University and Temple University, and she has centered her creative platform on amplifying the narratives of Black culture and heightening the awareness of the LGBTQIA+ community. Davis's work as a dancer, actor, and creative has allowed her to travel to all 50 states and internationally, where she spent 15 years researching and writing and creating the Queen's English. The Queen's English is wonderful, by the way. This is my personal copy, and I would highly recommend you purchase your own copy. The Queen's English is currently available for checkout at the library. We do have 2 copies currently available, or for purchase from our local bookstore, Vroman's. The link below this video will take you to Vroman's site to purchase your copy of the book. The Queen's English is a dictionary of over 800 terms and colloquial phrases related to the LGBTQIA+ community. So thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Olivia, for that introduction, and thank you so much to South Pasadena Library for having the Queen's English. Yeah.
We are super excited to be here with you tonight. I have to say also, I am personally just a huge fan of this book. I learned so much from it, and so I'm super excited for our patrons to get a chance to read it. So let's get started. I have a couple of questions we'll just start with. So let me just reiterate that you spent 15 years working on this book. So when you first began this book, what was the audience that you had in mind?
Oh, wow. So yes, 15 years, that's a long time, right? But I started this dictionary in 2006. Actually, I was a part of a dance company, the Philadelphia Dance Company in Philadelphia, PA. And interesting, but during that time, a lot of company members were part of the ballroom scene. What is the ballroom scene? Well, we kind of know the ballroom scene now because of Legendary or Pose. Also, if you've ever seen the documentary Paris is Burning. But the ballroom scene actually is a community of mostly Black or Latino or Latinx, gay, queer, trans individuals who really created a safe space and a social housing system to empower each other, to affirm each other. So we know language a little bit probably if we heard of like shade and read, over, the tens, the T. And so actually in 2006, a lot of my friends were part of the ballroom scene. And I was also kind of immersed in the ballroom scene, hearing the language. And I was really, just excited about the language, the history of the language. And I actually started, to ask what certain things meant. And it's interesting because a lot of times if we were say, a slang word, we would define it with slang, even though I don't feel like this is slang. But when I would define it or regurgitate it, it would always be in this Oxford dictionary way or this academic way. And we all thought that was, kind of entertaining. But truth be told, I think what was happening is I was really connected with language, and particularly a language that came from a community that needed to truly articulate themselves in a way that was empowering and affirming. And so I just thought it was really important. And so in the very beginning of this journey, I was collecting terms or creating a dictionary that would bring visibility to a community, right? A community that I felt was not necessarily given its just due with the language it was creating, with the styles, the dance, and a little bit more to understand the ballroom scene. If you know Madonna's song Vogue, right, and the dances that you saw with that video, that actually came from the ballroom scene. Vogue is an instrumental part of the dance elements that have been birthed in the ballroom scene. So again, I wanted to bring visibility, but more so, being a bisexual woman, I wanted to create a resource that helped affirm who I am, that gave me guidance and instructions and made me feel valid, right? That my identity was valid. I can be very open and honest that I didn't meet anyone who was openly bisexual until my not late 20s, but I want to say my mid 20s. And so, that within itself could be problematic, right? It's very much like, is my identity, does it exist or is it muted? Because a lot of times it was like you have to be gay or straight. It's those binary ideas that, kind of live within our society. And so I think I started to want to create a dictionary for me. So it was like I was the audience. But what I was learning that when I was, finding words that truly articulated my experience with my identity, I felt that I wanted to do that for others. I wanted to do that for, identities that are not always celebrated and visible and empowered. And sometimes we call those identities non-heteronormative identities, right? That's a big word, right? So let's define what heteronormativity is. Heteronormativity is kind of like what our makeup is in our current society. It's based on these ideas that, there's only two ways of identifying. You're either male or female, you're masculine or you're feminine, and you're heterosexual. But we all are learning more and more each day that that's not the case. That's not our truth. Our truth is that human identity is truly on a spectrum. It's vast, it's vibrant, it's diverse, it's intersectional. And so the audience, I guess, went from, in my very beginning, just collecting terms because I wanted to learn more about the ballroom scene and actually, bring visibility and credibility to that community. But then it went into wanting to stand firm in who I am and having a resource for others to stand firm in who they are with that type of visibility. And then it turned into, really truly celebrating human identity and having a resource that dives into how diverse we look with our gender identity, with our gender expression, with our sexual orientation, with our romantic orientation, and even our relationship orientation. So, this was a journey. And what I can say now is that I think this book is for everyone. That is the audience. It is for those who are in the community to feel empowered and celebrated and visible and affirmed. It's for those who need more guidance in finding who they are. And it is for those who are allies and just really want to understand and learn, this true spectrum and the diversity that lives in the larger LGBTQIA plus community.
Thank you so much for sharing. Excellent answer. I have to say, I definitely learned a lot from the book. You used one word that I think maybe some people in our audience might not be familiar with, intersectionality. Mm-hmm. So can you define for us what intersectionality is? Why is it important?
Absolutely. So I think this is a good time to go into the dictionary. So I'm going to flip through. And actually, I wish I can kind of show you as I'm flipping through, but the dictionary is very colorful and engaging, and that was done on purpose because, yes, it's a dictionary, but I wanted it to be engaging and fun, and we all are learning. So I'm going to flip to intersectionality. So in the dictionary, it looks like this. And I love this illustration because it says you. It says ethnicity, gender, first language, nationality, race, sexuality, ability, age, religion. So we have this idea a little bit of intersectionality, but let's read it from the book. Intersectionality, noun, a complex way in which varied forms of discrimination overlap or intersect. The importance of focusing on the presence of all marginalized communities within the larger framework of society. And so we want to say, want more info, think, looking at equality with everyone's unique experiences in mind. So when we think of intersectionality, we think of the many layers and diversity that lives within self, right? So that could be, we can start with me. What is my intersectionality of my identity? Well, like before, I am Black, right? I am a woman. I am bisexual. I am demisexual as well. I'm demi-romantic. I am African American as well, right? So that comes with a certain weight to it. But it's basically, it's about understanding that when someone has an experience, that experience is based on these different ways that particularly someone has been marginalized or oppressed because of the larger framework. So let's dive into that a little deeper. A lot of times in our society, we'll have a majority view, right? And that majority view will be those who are powerful or those who are more populated. And we can just look at our American society. Our American society, if we look at what is the power or what is the prominent view for centuries, right? Well, first, we know that it's male, right? Because if we think about, women's rights and the ability to have equal pay, we know that that has been an issue, right? So we can just start with, the separation, so male. And then if we talk about class, right? Most likely it will be upper class, the elitist. Then when we talk about race, right? Well, we have to understand who built the country, right? So it's white, right? And then, so if we talk about the majority view or power view, then, it is white, male, elitist. So anyone else not in that, prominent category will have some type of intersectionality that will define who they are, right? Whether it's, women's issues and equality, whether it's black issues and equality, whether it's AAPI issues and equality, or whether it's ability issues and equality or disability issues and equality. So that's what I mean about intersectionality. And where this comes in when it comes to language is because we all experience identity and how the world receives our identity based on this intersectionality, right? So someone who is AAPI and trans has a very unique experience. That intersectionality of their identity is very unique. And there are words that help articulate that. If you are youth, right, and you are queer, and non-binary, right? That is a particular experience, right? So that's what we mean about intersectionality. It's the many layers that truly articulate our identity, but it's how it's articulated in this larger framework of society.
Thank you. You mentioned articulating identity. Being able to give a label to your identity is, for you, a form of affirmation of your identity. When you were researching this book, did you come across anyone who was very against the idea of labeling their identity, who said, I don't want to identify as anything, I don't want any labels? And how, if you did, how did you handle that?
You know what? That's the beauty of words, right? So what I want to say is labels and words, they're not here to bind you, to say that this is the only way you can exist. They're just ways to help articulate your journey in this existence, right? And another thing I want to say about labels or words that identify a person, this is a personal journey, right? So if someone identifies themselves as such, then it is up to us to respect that and to use, that identity, that pronoun, that chosen name, because that's what is right. That is what is respectful. But when you say, I don't have a label. Well, actually, it's called no label, and that is definitely a term in the dictionary. There's no fight back. It was just kind of like, no, honestly, I don't like labels. I feel captive by labels. I choose no label, and that is actually how they identify, no label. And that's vast, and that's just, and and absolutely valid. And then you also, if we want to talk about not being, again, in a label or a certain way we have to identify, even when we're talking about gender identity, right? So you have someone who is agender, right? And that just means that they do not identify with a gender, right? Or someone who's null or someone who's neutros. These are all words that articulate someone who does not identify with any traditional idea of gender, right? And then you have gender nonconforming, right? Again, it's not that they don't connect with a gender, but just not a gender that has been traditionally, male or female, or woman or man, or masculine or feminine, right? So yes, there are those who are no label, and they are valid, and they also should be celebrated.
Thank you. I want to go back to when you were talking a little bit about ballroom culture and what ballroom culture is. One thing I really found notable about the book that I liked was that you do leave a note under certain definitions when they've been appropriated by mainstream culture. And if, as I know from reading the book, a lot of words have been appropriated from ballroom culture. Can you talk about what is lost to a community when certain terms or phrases are appropriated or they enter the mainstream?
Right. So thank you for asking that question. Because again, when I was saying what were some of the reasons why I created this book, and initially because learning about ballroom culture and learning the history and, the resilience and the fortitude of people of color, particularly Black and Latinx, gay, queer, and trans people, creating a space that truly supplemented their self-worth, right? Having to navigate homophobia and transphobia and racism, and building a space to say that regardless of all those things happening, we are going to have a safe space for us that, affirms who we are, validates who we are, celebrates who we are. So that's powerful, right? And with that, they created not only vibrant words, but dance and culture, and even fashion. A lot of fashion that you see, and how fashion houses are inspired, is through the ballroom scene, the New York City ballroom scene. So when we talk about appropriation, what's problematic is appropriation oftentimes creates erasure, right? So these big words. So appropriation just truly means that, you are, someone or something is taking something that doesn't belong to them and making it theirs without giving credit or the source of where it originated from. And that's problematic because that creates erasure. What's that word? Well, erasure is basically erasing or muting, a certain historical impact, an identity, a situation. It's excluding it. I mean, it is dissolving it where it never existed. And that's problematic because we want to make sure that when we tell history, we tell it correctly. So when we talk about the ballroom scene, I have, let's see if I can find a particular note in here. But when we talk about the ballroom scene, there's a lot of words like read or shade or tens or vogue femme. These words came from the ballroom scene. And so there's a usage note in here. So you'll see kind of this little red box there, and it'll say, this term originated in the ballroom scene and has been appropriated by the larger LGBTQIA plus community and mainstream. And I feel like that's really important because, again, we have to give credit where credit is due. We have to honor those whose creativity, that just because they didn't have the platform like a dictionary, or didn't have the power like elitists to say that this is ours, we still have to make sure that we give credit for their contributions, to society. And truth be told, not just the ballroom scene but LGBTQI plus individuals in general have made unique contributions, to our society. And I think it's very important that we acknowledge, them for, all of their efforts and what they have given, and if by us not doing that, again, creates erasure.
Thank you so much. I'll get that entire answer on a t-shirt. So, given the propensity for mainstream culture to appropriate language that is derived from the queer community, that showed up in the queer community, when you were researching this book, did you experience any skepticism from members of the LGBTQIA plus community? Was there anyone who thought, well, this will just be a guide for people to steal more of our words? Did you experience any of that?
Okay, so this 15 years has been a long time of ebb and flow. But what I will say is that I have been supported the whole time. I think once, I started to just continue to research words and how it's how I researched it. It's having individual conversations, it's having group discussions about words, about identity, about words that empower, affirm, evolve, the etymology of words, also how words hurt, how words at once, like we could talk about queer, how words once was derogatory, right? Because it was used with malice to identify someone who was, gay, homosexual. However, in the 1980s, was reappropriated and taken and given, a positive affirmation to say, oh yeah, I'm queer. I'm queer and I'm powerful, right? And so now we see, our younger generation, using queer because queer now is this all catch, identity or phrase or word that truly articulates someone's identity, whether it is non-cisgender or whether it's non-heterosexual, right? It's just this way of, I'm not going to say it's like no label, but it's this way of not having to have so many labels to really, express who you are. It's maybe queer feels, fully valid for you. So as far as, pushback, absolutely not. I was encouraged over and over to talk to someone else, that was always the thing. I would, it started off with friends, and then friends would introduce me to other friends and family members and, honorary members within, our larger LGBTQI plus community. I want to say I had conversations at LGBT centers. I've had conversations at Pride events. It just kept going on. I was really, really supported in this. And I think, again, because it's not to say we've never had a dictionary, but it had never been a dictionary that's over 800 words, and that is inclusive. And when I say inclusive, I'm highlighting the diversity that lives under this umbrella of LGBTQI+, right? It's not just about lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual, but it's also about agender and pangender and polygender and pansexual and non-binary, but it's also, again, that intersectionality of being black and lesbian, of being AAPI and queer, of being Latinx and trans, or being, being queer and Muslim, or being queer and disabled, right? So that's what I mean, that language that's truly diverse and that focuses on the true spectrum of humanity, right? And not just from that focused view of the majority. And I want to say, too, if it's not about pushback, but I was very adamant about sensitivity reads. That this book has always gone through multiple, quadruple, thousands of sensitivity reads because that was important. I wanted to make sure that if this platform is going to be used, it's going to be used correctly. So that's why it just couldn't be, a dictionary where it's just the term and the part of speech and the definitions, plural, right? Because, words can have multiple meanings just like in any dictionary. But there's also a usage example, like how do you use it? There's also, the synonym that you can connect immediately to. But then there's the did you knows, right? That dives deeper into the etymology of the word and, or how it's evolved and where it first was used and how it was used, even to, those usage notes. Is this pejorative? Is this a stereotype? Has it been reclaimed? I think all of those aspects are really important, and that's why I feel good about it, and that most members of the community feel celebrated and heard because it's our words, it's our culture, it's our identity, it's our pride. And then I'm very adamant about saying this word could be considered a stereotype, or do not use this term if a person has not identified as such. Those little details is what makes it not going to be used flippantly. And because actually in my introduction, I'm like, this is not for you to just use and take and not have sensitivity and compassion towards. This is a tool for us to learn and celebrate.
I thought the usage notes throughout the dictionary were particularly interesting. Did you ever consider not including words that are still offensive that have not been reclaimed? Because you do include certain like slurs
Mhm.
in throughout the dictionary. So was that ever a question in your mind?
So I think a big thing was to document language in its entirety. So words like dyke and faggot and queer, and other words, giving, they're in there, but giving that sensitivity, explaining more so that these words, were once derogatory, could be still considered derogatory to many, however, some have been reclaimed by some member of the community, giving that extra information. But even to go further into the history, the etymology of a word, because the word for dyke, dyke comes from bull, dyke, bull, dagger. These words were used as early as the 1900s during the Harlem Renaissance, right? So we're this, dyke was shortened, right? But it was bull dyke or bull dagger, and it was just simply a word that, one, articulated that a woman was attracted to another woman, or two, that the woman presented herself, that gender expression presented herself in a more masculine form, right? So, and there, people like Ma Rainey and Betsy Smith, these legendary blues singers, were proud bull dykes, proud bull daggers, right? But over time, the word, because of, using words with malice, got taken and was given negative connotation, right? Was basically taken as like, oh, well, you're a dyke, and that was hurtful and harmful. But then again, over time, the term got reappropriated by the members of the lesbian community, in particular, and was like, no, this is our word; it belongs to us, and we're taking it and we're empowering it. So there's so much history behind language, and I always like to say that language was created to I keep saying articulate, but it's true. It's to define and articulate, who you are to the world, when mainstream society didn't necessarily have those words to do it for you, or if they had words, it wasn't empowering or affirming. And then also language creates culture. So there's so many cultures, right, within this, LGBTQIA plus community. Again, there our queer youth, there's our gender nonconforming community, there's, or you can say TGNC, that's transgender nonconforming, and even non-binary communities. There's the lesbian community, there's the gay community. I mean, there's so many communities, and I think this is a celebration of all.
You definitely did a lot of historical research when you were compiling these terms. Was there any bit of history that particularly stuck out to you, or that really stuck with you that you'd like to share?
Wow, so much. I dived into the Harlem Renaissance because I thought that was just quite fascinating. I'm a black woman, and I've learned about the Harlem Renaissance, but they weren't telling me that Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston and Countee Cullen and Alan Locke and Ma Rainey and Josephine Baker, and Ethel Waters were, just like me. You know what I mean? So I think that's when I dived in to say, wow, like I'm learning more about who I am and my culture and my identity. So I thought that was quite exciting. I actually really loved learning more about the leather community and just sexual liberation and power dynamic. Just learning more about that. Just again, the spectrum of humanity, right, and the many layers in who we are, because it's not just about our sexual orientation, but it's our gender identity, our gender expression, our romantic, orientation, our relationship orientation. All of these things define who we are. I love the history of it. Even learning about, LGBTQ individuals in the military and how that transpired, and learning more about, the HIV and AIDS crisis. That's a really powerful moment in our American history, and I still don't think we do justice acknowledging what happened during that time. So diving into that history and wanting to write in a way that we can understand it and understand the effects of it, particularly some of the things that were happening in the 1980s with quarantining, right? And what we know about doing that now with with COVID-19. So, I really just enjoy diving into the history of the words.
And so, just as a reminder to our audience, if you have any questions, go ahead and throw those under the Ask a Question tab at the bottom. I've got a few more questions, and we'll see if we have any audience questions to go over. So, you are obviously a creative, you're a performer, and did this book serve as a creative outlet for you, if you want to talk about that?
Absolutely. In different ways. In the beginning, I think I love storytelling, and I think that's what you see in this dictionary. It's really telling the stories of, the members of the community that created these words. It's telling those stories. And so I think, diving into another part of me, yes, I'm a performer and actress, but, to also be able to document history, but also document present day was very fulfilling creatively, and to just listen to stories. I think our unique stories, all of our unique stories, are beautiful and worthwhile and should be written about. So this was an opportunity for me to do that. And again, I think it's the creativity you see inside of like how colorful it is. I think that was definitely a beautiful creative outlet for me. And I worked with 4 illustrators on this, all part of the community. My main illustrator, his name is Troy Lambert, and we actually worked almost 2 years on this with strategically deciding on what type of illustrations we wanted to use for the different terms. How can we, bring the terms to life so that way readers can understand and dive deeper into the meanings, right? And then I have Cassandra Fontaine, who is actually a Cali girl. And I have Mark Urey and Shanae Benjamin. So I'm just very excited that all of them brought their artistic abilities to the dictionary to really make it worthwhile. But yes, every color in the dictionary was handpicked. So it really gave me an opportunity to just dive into like that creative side of who I am. And the design of this book actually was happening in the height of, the pandemic. So because I'm a performer, Broadway was shut down. So that means, there was no work outlet for me. And during this dictionary, creating the dictionary really was helpful, so that way I did have that creative outlet during the time that I couldn't be physical. I still had an opportunity to still exercise my creativity through this book.
And what was it like when you have a visual dictionary? What was it like going to publishers with this book? How did you approach that?
Well, truth be told. So, again, I've worked on this dictionary a very long time, and I want to say around 2016, 17, I started to, pitch the idea to different publishers, but I didn't have illustrations. It was the dictionary, I mean, I still had the elements, like the did you know and the usage notes, but the vibrancy of the colors weren't there, and I got a lot of no's. So I was like, well, you know what, I think this dictionary is so valuable. It's so resourceful. It really dives into those larger important conversations around inclusivity and diversity, and also sexual orientation, gender identity, expression. I was like, we need this book, right? And so that's when actually I started working with Troy, because I was a friend had asked, well, how do you see the book? And I said, well, I want it to be beautiful. I remember saying that, and I said I wanted it to be a coffee table book, because I wanted it to be something that sits there and you just open it and it feels, as I open it and like flip through, but it feels like it belongs. It doesn't feel unfamiliar. It doesn't feel threatening. It doesn't feel confusing, but it feels engaging and you're eager to learn. So that's what I wanted. And so that's when I connected with Troy. And Troy and I worked a good year and a half. And it got to and we had so much fun working together. And it got to a place where, he was like, Chloe, I think you should, try it again. And then that way we, definitely I went through a literary agent, and she loved it. Lila Camponi, thank you very much. And she shopped it, and It was so quick. It was yes, yes, many yeses actually. Where, I was so elated, and decided to go with Clarkson Potter from Penguin Random House. But yeah, so I guess that's a testament to understand that something like this needed that visual stimulation, and who knows, maybe dictionaries need to be more creative and colorful for all of us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We have a couple of audience questions. So the first one I want to cover, we are a learning circle here. So maybe you can share from the book, is there a difference between transgender and transsexual?
Absolutely. And you know what? We're going to read both from the dictionary. I think that's a great question. Let me go to my T's. Okay. So we'll start with transsexual. Adjective, of relating to or being a person who identifies with a different sex than their assigned sex at birth. Okay? And there's more, but I'm just going to read transgender. And I can kind of show you that it's like all of this is for transsexual. So that's what we mean by lots of information. And so we have transgender, we'll see it, and you'll actually see the pride flag. And that's like a big part of the dictionary, is that the multiple pride flags are included in definitions. Transgender, adjective, of relating to or being a person who identifies with a gender identity and or expression that differs from their assigned sex at birth. This term is often shortened to trans. Okay. So the main difference is, because transsexual used to just truly focus on if an individual has transitioned and had gender affirmation. I like to say gender affirmation, not gender reassignment, but gender affirmation surgery, to transition into the gender that is most affirming, right? When a person has done that through their physical makeup, right, then that could be considered transsexual. However, that could be the same thing as transgender. However, what I want to say is both terms are a preference to that individual, okay? So when you're transgender, that does not necessarily mean that you've had gender affirmation surgery or therapies that physically show that gender that you are aligned with, right? Transgender, it's up here, right? So this is how I want to break it down. So when we think of gender identity, we think of, right, what's in your mind. What do you believe yourself to be? Okay? So I'm going to separate gender identity versus sexual anatomy. Okay? So sexual anatomy, that's what, we are birthed with, right? You can have traditional female sexual anatomy. You can have traditional male sexual anatomy. And you can also have a variation of sex characteristics, and that is intersex, right? So all of those are valid. Female, male, intersex. And actually in 2018, that is when Colorado was the first state to actually issue an intersex birth certificate, right? But for a very long time, when I go back to that word, heteronormative society we live in, usually the doctor will check female or male, right? Boy, girl. Now, from that assignment that the doctor gave you, based on what you feel, this is up here, this is your gender identity. If you feel that, I'll take myself, I was assigned female at birth. I identify as female, so I am cisgender. Now, if I was assigned male at birth, but I identify as being female, then I am transgender, right? So it's all here. It has nothing to do with your sexual anatomy for transgender. But also transgender can be an umbrella term for, other identities that, again, if you're not assigned what the doctor assigned you and you feel differently about that, which is valid and should be respected, then that is, part of what is trans, right? Transsexual. That is when you have had gender affirmation surgery that aligns your gender identity with your physical makeup. That is what transsexual is. Now, here's the other thing. A person will let you know how you should identify, how they want to identify. For instance, it is more proper to just say a person is transgender. That is a term that we want to use more of. However, there are people that want to be called transsexual, and my friend Gloria, who's in Mexico City, she is proud, and she is a transsexual woman. She is over 60 years old, and that's how she feels affirmed. So that's the difference. It's really how the individual wants to be identified. However, when you say transgender, it doesn't necessarily mean that someone has gone through, gender affirmation surgery to that they're not transgender. I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you for that thorough answer. We've got a few other questions. So, how did the words and histories you learned about throughout your research change your life views, your way of thinking, or your identity?
Well, let's start with my identity. First and foremost, diving into this dictionary and researching, I can say that I am a proud demisexual, biromantic, bisexual woman. However, I can also articulate that through my time being on this earth, that I can see when I was heteroflexible. I can see when I was bi-curious. I can also remember the experience of being closeted or semi-closeted and being bisexual. And what does that word mean? It's just when you're closeted or semi-closeted, it just means that you're uncomfortable with presenting who you are to a larger group or to the public. But in particularly like queer or gay settings, you're comfortable. But when you're in more heteronormative settings, you're not comfortable. So yes, there was a time that I struggled with that. And writing this dictionary over 15 years, I want to say by year 3 or 4, I was like, no, I am who I am, right? So that's helpful. So I've evolved because I stand firm and I truly advocate for us understanding that human identity is on a spectrum. It's vast, it's vibrant, it's diverse. And I just want to continue to teach that because I just want to make sure that we all feel heard and seen and visible.
Thank you. All right, we've got one more question so far, and it's come from someone inside the building. So, do you think a dictionary specifically might be particularly useful as a tool for people to try to educate and maybe change the minds of those who are anti-LGBTQ plus? Does it legitimize or give authority or make it easier to refer to certain identities?
Well, what I will say is, first of all, having a book, but particularly having a dictionary that's published by a large publishing house gives credibility, But I do think in general that this is an excellent resource for, again, those who are allies and want to learn more, but also an excellent resource for those who need to learn more. This is great when you're talking about, DEI conversations, diversity, equity, inclusion. When you need to advocate and affirm that, again, human identity is on a spectrum. We have the myriad of ways that we can identify. And when it's questioned, it's like, well, it's here, and it's in the dictionary because it is valid, because multiple people identify as such, right? And even if it's not in the dictionary, that identity is still valid. So I do believe that this is a resource that could and will navigate those important conversations around understanding identity and the spectrum of identity.
All right, thank you so much. I see we have one comment, one of our viewers thinking about ways they can incorporate this book when doing DEI training in the workplace. Thank you So I just wanted to point that out. But thank you so much for joining us tonight. I think that's all of our questions. And once again, you can purchase the book by clicking the link at the bottom of this screen. And again, would highly recommend it. If you are not interested in purchasing, you can always check it out from the library as well. So thank you, Chloe Davis, for being with us this evening. This was a wonderful conversation. I appreciate your insight and all of your information. You're obviously super knowledgeable about all of this, which I love. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And of course, I would encourage you all to, especially this Pride Month, right, to grab a book, check it out from the library. Also, gift a book. I think that's really important. So, and you can also learn more about the terms in the dictionary. You can follow at the Queen's English US. We like to do our word of the week, so you can learn about the myriad of words that are in this dictionary, over 800. And I just again encourage you to, if not get the dictionary, I would love for you to, but just I do encourage more conversations around identity, whether it be your identity and the evolution of who you are, but who you love, and encouraging all of us, for us all to feel empowered in who we are.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you.